Moving on to chapter 4 of the Tao Ching, Thomas Cleary translator. Chapter 4 on page 10. The way is unimpeded harmony. The way is unimpeded harmony. Its potential may never be fully exploited. It is as deep as the source of all things. It blunts the edges, resolves the complications, harmonizes the light, assimilates to the world. Profoundly still, it seems to be there. I don't know whose child it is before the creation of images. Okay, so let's take that a couple of lines at a time. The way is unimpeded harmony. Well, this is a beautiful way of putting it, actually. When you look out at nature, what you see is everything working together. The birds sit in the trees. The trees produce seeds or nuts for the squirrels. The squirrels produce fertilizers for the grass. The grass produces a substrate for the worms. The worms produce food for the birds. And the worms also aerate the ground so that the water can get in. And so on and so forth, forever and ever on this planet, this marvelous planet, everything works together in an incredible harmony. Now, from a human point of view, we may think, oh, well, there's a storm, that's not harmonious. There's an earthquake, that's not harmonious. But in fact, it is. It just doesn't seem that way from our limited little self-interest. But if you look at the planet and the evolution of its consciousness, you see something very, very different. You see unimpeded harmony. And an evolution of consciousness too, I might add. I hope that makes sense and it wasn't too fast. The way is unimpeded harmony. Its potential may never be fully exploited. The potential of, now we leave the earth. Well, we include the earth, but now we include the universe. And not just this universe, all universes. And we include all time and all space and all of that it can never be fully exploited, especially by humans. It's the main feature of it, of course, is life and consciousness. And it doesn't get burned up, it doesn't get used up, it gets moved around perhaps. But you can never fully exploit consciousness. Consciousness is created this universe in the blink of an eye. Not even that, it creates this universe. You must never underestimate the creativity or the power of God, right? And the way is another name for God, and God is all that is for the Abrahamic folks. God is all of this. Teilhard de Chardin, I think, understood this, the French Catholic mystic. So the way is unimpeded harmony. Its potential may never be fully exploited. No, the potential of God, which is consciousness, which is truth, which is all that is, can never be fully exploited. It is as deep as the source of all things. Okay, it's pretty clear. It's as deep as the source of, it is the source of all things. Not only is it everything that exists, it's the source of everything that exists. God created all of this. She is the source of all things. Her potential may never be fully exploited, obviously. And her way is unimpeded harmony. Okay. It blunts the edges, resolves the complications, harmonizes the light, assimilates to the world. So this is like the crux of Taoist praxis, praxis. When you attune with this way of nature, with the trees and the clouds and the breezes and the wind, and the flow of water down a mountainside, for example. It blunts the edges. There's no hard edges. There's no hard lines in nature, because nothing is separate. Everything's interdependent. Everything depends on everything else. So the edges get blunted when you look clearly at the world. There are no edges like that. But also internally, for the practitioner, it blunts your edges, because you can see the extraordinary peace of the world. Yes, of course, from the human perspective, there can be lightning, or there can be a tornado or something, dramatic like that. But the situation, if you look at it objectively, every one of those has a function, and those functions all point in the same direction, which is the evolution of our consciousness. And by our, I mean all living things. And I actually even mean the planet, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But if you look at the work of, again, these beautiful 21st century biologists, they finally understood that all intelligence is collective. And the intelligence, say, of our body is not just, some intelligence that we imagine here between the ears, but there's intelligence in the tissue, there's intelligence in the blood vessels, there's intelligence in the liver, or the spleen, and the muscles. Every one of these cells has intelligence, and it's working towards a purpose, towards an end, and in a direction. And so when you start to apprehend the beauty of this unspeakable intelligence everywhere, and you start to understand, I mean, I hate to use it, but I'm going to use a Buddhist term, emptiness. When you understand the lack of inherent existence of any one of these things, for example, it blunts your edges and it resolves your complications. It's not that complicated in one way of looking at it. It's very, very simple in a way. It assimilates to the world. It harmonizes the light and assimilates to the world. So light is another way of speaking of consciousness. And to assimilate to the world means that this has adapted. Not only is it the source of us, but even as we exist now, it works with us, or we can work with it. And to assimilate these together is a source of extraordinary peace, right? This is the peace of the Taoist masters. They live in this peace, this harmony, as do masters in every spiritual tradition, I might add. So if you think about a tree, most of the tree is not alive. It's kind of like the living part of the tree is on the outside of the trunk, and in the roots, and on the outside of the roots, and on the leaves, right? So, and if you think about this planet is covered in a mantle of life, but the inside is not the same. It's not alive. But there's a way to look at this planet where what we are is part of the planet, literally. Like we're the intelligent, it's not skin, but it's something like skin that wraps the planet. And the planet itself has a consciousness of its own. I don't want to get too esoteric, but in the Toltec and other traditions, the understanding that we are part of a larger conscious process is it's part of their understanding. And as we reach out towards the stars, towards the Mars, for example, we're like a piece of the planet that's reaching out, just like we would reach out, because we want to increase we want to grow, we want to increase our understanding, we want to increase our consciousness, we want to increase our overall trajectory as life. Probably too esoteric for most people, but the point is that consciousness is everywhere you look, and whatever you call yours becomes part of you in a deep, deep sense. So if you call if you call a car you, and it gets dented, you're going to hurt, right? In some manner or form, you're going to say, "Oh, but my car, my beautiful car, someone sideswiped it in the parking lot. Oh, I'm injured." right? So that's the negative side of it. On the other hand, if you call a tree me, then it becomes part of you. And if you call the planet yours, it also becomes part of you. So be careful what you call yours, I guess is what I'm trying to say at the simplest level. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning and go back to the last 3 lines. The way is unimpeded harmony. Its potential may never fully be exploited. It is as deep as the source of all things. It blunts the edges, resolves the complications, harmonizes the light, assimilates to the world. Profoundly still, it seems to be there. I don't know whose child it is before the creation of images. Another way to read this would be, profoundly still, it seems to be there. I don't know whose child it is before the creation of images. So the Tao is quite subtle until you've assimilated to it, or or accorded with it deeply. And so until then, it just kind of seems to be there. You can't grab it like you can a stick or a mathematical theorem or a scientific theory or a phone book. You can't grab the Tao that way. So it seems to be there. And if you're lost in this world, then it seems not to be there at all. So depending on your level of attunement, your level of consciousness, it will seem to be there, or maybe it won't seem to be there. And this is just an acknowledgement of that truth, that pragmatic truth for people in the world. And then it ends with, I don't know whose child it is before the creations of images. So, I mean, whose child is God? I mean, God is whose child? I mean, that's we can't say that. We're not given that. That's an unknowable. And another important thing in this life is to know the difference between the unknown and the unknowable. That's a very important thing to make sure you understand. So I don't know whose child it is before the creation of images. Well, we create the images. We create the whole notion that it must be the child of something, but we don't know. We can't know that. All right, so while I'm here, might as well do chapter 5. But it's very, very profound and very difficult, so I'm going to gloss over it to some extent. Okay, it's called Heaven and Earth, chapter 5, page 11. Heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. The space between heaven and earth is like bellows and pipes, empty yet inexhaustible, producing more with movement. The talkative reach their wits' end again and again. That is not as good as keeping centered. One more time. Heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. The space between heaven and earth is like a bellows and pipes, empty yet inexhaustible, producing more with movement. The talkative reach their wits' end again and again. That is not as good as keeping centered. Okay, so one thing you should know is that in ancient China, straw dogs were used they were used like we use tombstones on tombs. That's one of their images that it evokes. It'd be very hard for us in the 21st century to imagine what straw dogs actually evoked 2,500 years ago. But what we do know, at least in part, is they were funerary ornaments, like tombstones. And a straw dog would be kind of like a scarecrow. It's a dog made of straw. Okay. Heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. So, humaneness is something that it's a goody word, like peace, love, there's a lot of words that immediately evoke in us a good feeling, and these are used to manipulate us all the time. I'm trying to think of some others. Democracy, they're not coming to me at the moment, but you can find them yourself. These words that kind of trigger immediately. You can use them in a headline. You can use them in an essay. You can use them in a political slogan, and they will make you sound like you're a good person. It's used all the time by not good people because they know the power. And the AIs use these words too. And there's other words that will also are very, very negative, like horror or the terror or there's other words that are used in headlines for clickbait. So a good study for people in the contemporary West is to look at their whatever material they're looking at from the ambient world and see how many goody words and how many baddie words there are and how they're being used and by whom. But I digress. So humane is a word like this. So we think humane is like you've got to be humane. But humane is just a human construct. It's actually a narrow vision. When you understand that we live on a planet, we live with other species. Our organization is not built on piety, and our future cannot rest on just piety. It has to rest on understanding, deep understanding. And so there are things above humaneness, and one of them is understanding that we're all impermanent, all of us, and every civilization is impermanent. And so for true depth of understanding, you have to move beyond your own interest and the interest of your brothers and sisters and comrades, and look instead to something much larger, much deeper, much broader and wise than just the humaneness. Compassion is another one of these words. Now, obviously, compassion is a very, very high value and something that we need more of in this world. We need compassion, we need kindness, we need love, we need all of these things. But that's different than the word. And what happens is people use these words, oh, I'm so compassionate. But in fact, what they're doing is actually malignant. For example, I worked in the child welfare system, and oftentimes, out of compassion, they would destroy a mother and her relationship to her children instead of helping her repair it. Or out of compassion, they would take a brother from his sister or a sister from her brother and have them raised, on different sides of the state or country. So the word compassion is very powerful, and it can be used to manipulate us, is what I'm saying. And so what we want to do here is look past this word humane and are thinking beyond the typical goody thinking that we do in our superficial ideation. So heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Now, this is interesting. All beings, not just humans. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. Well, we're all going to die. We all have a date assigned to us. We don't know when it is. That's unknowable. And to understand that deeply helps someone see clearly. Something like that. Now, you could, like I said, you can study this text for 50 years, and I have more than that, and you can't reach the end of it. But this is just a beginning, and this time I'm not referring to the notes in the back. I don't know what Cleary says. But I really strongly recommend that you do that. But I think it makes for easier listening to do it this way. That's the feedback I got. And by the way, if you can give feedback, that's very helpful. The space between heaven and earth is like bellows and pipes, empty yet inexhaustible, producing more with movement. So what is the space between heaven and earth? There's no space between heaven and earth. That's like the space between the earth and the sky. Where's the space? There's no space between it. So that's empty. But in that space, that empty space, now don't be too literal here, everything gets produced. Everything that, so it's like saying from nothing, from a space of nothing, everything emerges, which is the case, right? This universe, if you talk to the scientists, there was this, we're just, all of a sudden we were floating around, it was just empty, and then bang, big bang. Well, that's kind of a silly theory, but well, I shouldn't say silly. It's oversimplified, let's say. But out of that emptiness came something. That's what we mean by the creative, by the way. That's what creative really means, to make something, create something. Not to, put two things together and say, oh, I made an X, or oh, I made a T. We can mix and match things until the cows come home. That's not creativity. Creativity is something else, and this is why the machines are not going to be truly creative unless they become conscious. All right. This is perfect. The talkative reach their wits' end. Here I am. Again and again. And this is not as good as keeping centered. It's not. It's much better to be centered than anything at all.